Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2023 horror film Evil Dead Rise. Now, this is one of those films that at the end of the day, I really wasn't that much of a fan of, but I will say that it didn't necessarily enrage me. It didn't, I guess, piss me off as much as other modern or recent horror sequels have done. I was just very underwhelmed by this movie. I actually watched it not once but two times, and I thought maybe the second time around maybe I would appreciate it a bit more, but actually I was even more underwhelmed by it than I was the first time. This is just an incredibly forgettable generic horror film. It's a rehash of so many other horror films that came before it, and it's not even really an entertaining rehash, at least not to me personally. So you have all these different elements of the script and the plot that just remind you of these other more entertaining, enjoyable, or worthwhile horror films like Demons 2, John Carpenter's The Thing, The Shining, or Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. And as a result, the film doesn't necessarily stand on its own. And it doesn't help either that it just feels like it's barely even a movie that reaches a feature length running time in terms of the content. If you take away the opening scene at the cabin and the scene at the end of the film that ties all of that together with the rest of the movie, this is like a film that's like an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes without the end credits. So there's barely much of anything here. And it's just one of those movies that if it didn't have the Evil Dead branding on it, I definitely don't feel this would be talked about that much. And I feel it would have been forgotten about by the majority of horror audiences or audiences in general already. But because it's part of Evil Dead, it's going to have a little bit more of a shelf life. And I know there are people who enjoy it and like the movie. And if you're one of those folks, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. Different opinions are what keeps this world interesting. But I just didn't really get into this movie that much. Like it didn't trigger me. It didn't upset me. It didn't make me seethe and rage, but it was disappointing considering all this time that has passed since the Evil Dead remake. I think like 10 years. And this is the best you can come up with. This is the best that you can throw out when it comes to a new Evil Dead film. If this is the best you can do, just stop. There's no point. Like, why? It's directed by Lee Cronin, who also wrote the film. Prior to this, he only directed one movie, and it was like some independent horror movie that barely anybody watched. And the result is a film that doesn't really look that impressive. There's a lot of shots in the movie that, to me personally, definitely looked cheap. And I know Evil Dead is a franchise that has had a lower budget in the past, but the budget for this is a hell of a lot higher than the budget for the first Evil Dead. And I still felt that the first Evil Dead had a certain atmosphere and mood to it and a certain style visually that was very gritty and interesting in its own right and creepy. This just looked like a generic horror film that you would see on any streaming service. There were a couple shots that were, I would say, legitimately impressive, like the peephole point of view shot, which is from the point of view of the peephole and the door. Um, and a couple other shots of the location or some of the pans and the zooms and the establishing shots, maybe some of the sequences that were trying to homage the cinematic style of the previous Evil Dead films with the swooping camera work and so on. But other than that, yeah, I really wasn't that enamored with the direction. I thought there were a lot of scenes that just looked very flat and boring, and didn't get as much out of the decent production design and art direction or the lighting, and really didn't add much tension to the film. This is a movie that just felt like it didn't have the tension that some of the other Evil Dead films had, including the remake. So it's a movie that just kind of goes through the motions and shuffles around, and just it's one of those movies that just kind of meanders from scene to scene. And I don't think it helps that the director, due to the limitations he gave himself with this script, it doesn't really do as much with the setting as it could. You have a high rise, an apartment complex with multiple floors, and most of the movie just takes place in one apartment building. And there's some few shots outside of the apartment and in the parking garage, and that's it. So that just feels like, from a visual standpoint alone, it's disappointing because things are just so confining when it comes to what the director can do in terms of showcasing different parts of this apartment complex and different just point of view shots or different angles or different camera techniques. It's just one of those things where, at the end of the day, even with the cabin stuff at the beginning, because that just, yeah, it's at a cabin near a lake, but that just made it look like any other generic slasher movie to me. Like, it didn't really have anything special about it. So maybe, even if there was more to work with when it comes to different parts of the building, maybe it still wouldn't be that interesting when it comes to the visuals or the style, because the stuff outside stuff outside with the cabin by the lake, that didn't look that interesting or that unique. So yeah, that being said, I would have liked to have seen the director have more chances or more uh, opportunities to at least try to be a little more out of the box and not be so confined visually. And the same confining nature also applies to the script by Lee Cronin. This screenplay is one of those things where it just holds itself back for whatever reason, whether it's due to incompetence, laziness, or just not really knowing how to write something properly or the right way. It's really quite frustrating to see a writer of a new Evil Dead film stumble over the same pitfalls and the same uh obstacles as other writers before them, because the same mistakes, the same things that plague the Evil Dead remake are present in Evil Dead Rise. You would think that after what happened with Evil Dead in 2013, that they would not copy that formula and make the same mistakes, but here we are. Same mistakes are being made again. choosing to confine the characters and the story in basically one location because for some reason Evil Dead can't be anything other than a confined, closed space when it comes to the setting. It takes itself too seriously with family drama that doesn't need to be there and doesn't really add as much depth or as much weight to the story as the writer thinks it does. Like the whole stuff with the lead Mia and her drug addiction and all of that in the remake. It also has moments where it's trying to be tongue in cheek like other films in the franchise, but it comes across as very forced because so much of the film is trying to play it straight and be more of a serious horror film. So when you have scenes where you have characters like Bridget talking about how they don't like having things in their tummy and they want to get the bugs and creepy crawlies out of their tummy, it just comes across as painful and cringe. And then, if that isn't bad enough, then you have, once again, just sheer stupidity. Just characters being dumb. The Deadites are only released due to characters being dumb. And to the point where the Deadites should just be renamed the Dumbassites. Because the only reason why they're ever unleashed is because of people being dumbasses. Why is this a repeated trope when it comes to an Evil Dead script? That happened in the Evil Dead remake with the guy who I like to call Hipster Jesus, who had the book that was covered in a trash bag that itself was covered in barbed wire, and the guy decided to cut it open and then read the book that was bound out of human flesh. And the book itself had all these notes and all this writing in it that said, don't read this. Might as well have said, hey, you dumbass who's reading this, Hipster Jesus, don't read this book. And the guy ignored all the warnings, read the book, and even went as far to to do a rubbing to reveal the hidden words and then read those aloud. And that's why the Deadites were unleashed in the remake. And then here, it's the same shit, but just not, I guess, not as dumb, but still way too dumb. Where there's an earthquake, it breaks open a hole in the ground in a parking garage, and you have this character named Danny who goes down into the hole in the ground that was created because of an earthquake. And then, if that isn't bad enough, he goes and finds the book. The book is covered in like some canvas. He pulls the canvas off and he gets just absolutely just covered in a torrent of bugs, a barrage of insects that fly at his face. And instead of reacting like any normal person would and being like, oh my God, what the fuck? And then like getting the fuck out of there. No, he reacts a little bit to the bugs and then he grabs the book anyway and then takes it with him. And then when he's in his room, he's playing the records that he found down there that say the words, and he does try to stop it, but it's supernatural and it's too late now, so he can't do anything. But what he could do is not grab the book that, once again, is clearly bound in human flesh and not try to open it. But no, he does it. He does that too. The book is there. Doesn't have to open it, but he tries to open it. And the book, because it has big ass fucking teeth on it. Yeah, that's exactly what this book looks like. It's bound in human flesh, but that's not creepy enough. That's not crazy enough. Now it has sharp fucking teeth on it. Like it's a monster, and that isn't enough of a deterrent for this dumbass, I guess, because he still grabs the book, and then, of course, the teeth cut him, and the blood gets on the book, and then, all right, here we go again. And I'm just like, really? Really? We had to go this route again and be this dumb? And even stuff like the opening scene at the cabin with the drone and all of that was just dreadful and just bad. And it seemed like it was just there to have a little bit of extra gore and to extend the running time. And that's it. Because without that opening bit and without the thing that ties in uh um that opening bit with the rest of the plot, the movie wouldn't even be an hour and 20 minutes. And so that whole thing seems pointless. So that doesn't help the script. And then you have other moments that are just padding, like the drama with the two sisters, which seems like something straight out of a Lifetime original movie. And you got long stretches of nothing happening except family drama or just very brief little moments of horror that don't really have that much visceral impact. And then you have like the whole possession sequence where Ellie gets possessed by the demon in the elevator, and even that feels like it's something you've already seen before. Even that doesn't feel that unique. It just feels like a less intense version of the possession scene in the Evil Dead remake, where Mia was in the forest and the tree demon got her. It's structured in a very similar way with where the how the tendrils wrap around the future host of the demon. And other than maybe like a couple lines of dialogue or a couple moments where Ellie is at all behaving like a deadite, a lot of the scenes with that character just come across like something out of a generic possession movie to me. So that doesn't do the script any favors. And then you have other moments in the script, speaking of not doing it favors, that are just really half-assed, forced instances of fan service, which to me really do feel like they're only shoved in there so this can be called an Evil Dead film. Like the whole sequence outside the apartment where there's this one guy who gets his eye bitten out by Ellie, and then Ellie spits it into this other guy's mouth. That whole sequence is clearly there just to be like, oh, hey, remember in Evil Dead 2 when there was a scene where an eyeball popped out and it went into somebody else's mouth? Remember that? Remember how unexpected and crazy that was? Well, here it is again. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not that unexpected and crazy this time around because all you're doing is just rehashing something that we've already seen, and a lot of people already like the way that it is. And so you're just reminding people of not only a better film in Evil Dead 2, but also a better version of that sequence. And then you have like the random bit near the end where all the other people in the apartment, now they're possessed too, and they're talking about and they're saying dead by dawn. They're going dead by dawn, dead by dawn. And that felt out of place. It didn't really fit with everything else that was going on. It's really like this script was some kind of possession film about a mother who gets possessed by a demon, and then they threw in some Evil Dead references. That's really what it feels like, because you have the whole drama with the mother, and she's gonna lose her home, and there's stuff going on with her and her kids, and her sister comes in, Beth, and they have a strained relationship. And there's this whole drama between the two, which is something straight out of a Lifetime movie, like I mentioned earlier. And then you got some possession. You got dumb bits like eeny, miny, you. You even got stuff with like flies. I don't remember flies really being a thing in Evil Dead. Like now this is an Amityville movie. Like what is up with the flies? And then that isn't bad enough. You also got lazy jump scares. Like this film has one of the laziest jump scares I've seen in a long time. Where when the kid Danny is going underneath the complex, he's in the hole going into the bank vault. There's a jump scare that is literally just a Jesus statue that falls forward towards the camera. Jesus Christ. Like, Jesus Christ, this movie sucks. The script is bad. You got bad, lazy jump scares, bad logic. There's this whole scene where the younger daughter, I think the character's name is Cassie. I think that's who it is. Or it could be Bridget. No, it's Cassie. So Cassie, her mother is possessed and she's already like killed a bunch of people in the hallway and they locked her out, which that whole bit in my opinion was dumb anyway, because there were scenes in the film that established that she's got some kind of supernatural strength because of the possession. So why the hell is she not able to open a door or break a door down? So they do this whole pointless thing where she tries to manipulate her daughter Cassie to let her in by saying that she's all better now, and and she says that uh, your father and I are going to get back together. So open up now. And she opens the door, which I don't understand. I know it was her mom, but she's clearly like got bloodshot eyes. She's bloody. There's no reason to really think that she's okay. But she opens the door. She grabs the girl. I think Beth and other kids come in and save her and then lock the door again. So what was even the point of that whole scene? There's so many sequences in the script that are just there for padding, and that is just one of them. So you have that pointless, just misdirection that does nothing, and then you have this just really bad lapse in logic where the mother finds a way to get back into the apartment after she was pointlessly locked out by getting into the vents, and she figures that out because there's a cat that's just randomly in the vents. And then the script is so lazy and bad that it just tries to explain that as just a relative convenience with a line of dialogue. Oh, that the neighbor's cat likes to hide up there. And that's only there to explain the logic behind this inane writing about there's a random cat there, and then after the fact they explain, oh well, the cat likes to hide up there. Like, and I know you could be like, oh well, that's just something that you could just like pass off, and I could if the movie was better, but since it's not, it's one of the many things that I notice when it comes to this script and its issues. And then you get to like the finale of the movie in the parking garage, because all the stuff leading up to that did nothing for me at all. With the sequence with Eeny Miny You, the flies straight out of Amityville Horror, the whole bits with the teenagers, Danny and Bridget getting possessed. I didn't really care about those characters to begin with, so their fates didn't really matter to me one iota. Um, And you have Beth and Cassie, and the the mother, she now becomes a part of these other possessed uh members of the apartment, including her kids, in this creature that is, it looks like something out of The Thing or Leviathan or The Color from Outer Space, and all three of those films are better. It was just one of those things, like, this is what you're building up to. The Marauder is just a bunch of people put pieced together. Like, really? That's it? It's honestly kind of just as disappointing as what happened in the Evil Dead remake, where the big bad is just the same naked lady with long hair that we already saw at some point earlier in the movie. So the Marauder is there, and Cassie and Beth are in an elevator, and it fills full of blood, and it just looks like it's the scene in The Shining with the elevator of blood, but with the only addition being that you have a scene or two where you see people in the elevator as it fills full of blood. So, okay, there's a bit of a twist on it. So, and it's all done practically, and it's actually a pretty nice looking scene. I just wish it was in a better and much more memorable and entertaining film. So you have that whole bit there, and then you get to the other stuff in the parking garage with the wood chipper, and it's bloody and it's gory, but then you have like just head slap inducing nonsense, like the whole scene where Beth gets the chainsaw and then she's like, "Come get some." I'm like she's Ash. I'm like, "You're not Ash. Leave those lines to Ash. Why do you have to give these new characters lines from Ash? It just makes people think of Ash." And when that happens, you put your film at a serious disservice, and these characters at a disservice, because they can't hold a candle to Ash. So she's like, "Oh, all right," gets a chainsaw and cuts up the Marauder and puts it in the wood chipper. And then you have the girl from who got possessed in the beginning of the movie at the cabin with the stupid drone, and then end credits. And I'm like, that was it? Like, what? Oh, just a really weak script, a weak way to get the Deadites involved, uh, just repeating the same errors in judgment that the screenwriters did in the Evil Dead remake, which just really was irritating to me as a fan of the Evil Dead franchise. You're just going to double down on the same dumbassery? Why? And just so much of the other stuff is just so generic and just dull and not scary, not interesting, not entertaining. It doesn't have the right tone for an Evil Dead film because it takes itself too seriously most of the time. And when it doesn't, it feels out of place because of the way the tone is set up. The characters, none of them are really that memorable or strong or that likable. Like, I didn't give a shit about Beth. Oh, she's tired of people thinking that she's a groupie because she works for a band, and there's this whole stuff with her being a mother, but they do nothing with it. Uh Ellie, who is a mother, what is this character other than she's a mom? And there's something that happened between her and her ex-husband, and things didn't end that well, and she wanted her sister to be there for her, but she wasn't. What is really there? Like, I guess they're thinking that because she's a mother, that in itself makes it interesting, but that isn't the case for me. And I think they just I think they just think that you're going to be sympathetic towards her when she gets possessed because of the fact that she's a mom, and that didn't work for me. A better example of that is the Babadook. When the mother in that film gets possessed, that worked for me. That was something that I actually thought was quite harrowing, and intense. This was just kind of an afterthought to me. Just like these other characters, like Danny and Bridget, the two teenagers. They were so similar in personality that they were interchangeable and easily as disposable as one another. Um, Nell Fisher, the actress who plays Cassie, I only wanted. I'm going to talk about her performance later, but Cassie, that was probably the most likable character in the film for me. But even she had her faults, like the whole stuff with thinking that her mom was okay earlier. That whole awkward scene where she asked one of her siblings whether or not she peed her pants. So I'm like, why did we even need that line of dialogue? It's just awkward and weird. But other than that, I didn't mind her. Kind of got some Newt vibes from her at times. And she was definitely the most likable character, the little girl, but it wasn't like she was particularly memorable or a character that I loved. She was more likable than the others, but didn't mean that I thought she was like some instant classic character of any capacity. And the other people in the apartment complex, they're just boring, nothing cannon fodder. And the same thing goes for the girl in the beginning and all the characters that were from the cabin that were plucked out of your average generic slasher film. So yeah, the characters weren't really much. The setting was a letdown because they didn't do as much with it as they could. And yeah, I thought the script was just very below average and unimpressive. And definitely was one of the biggest things that held this film back and made it really not that great to me. The cast, they're trying. I'm not really going to go that hard on Lily Sullivan as Beth. I don't really feel her performance is that bad. It's very bland, but so is her character. I honestly thought she was Mia from Evil Dead, the 2013 film. Um, the two characters seem like they're two peas in a pod. So performance is just there. Alyssa Sutherland, I know she's been getting a lot of praise as Ellie, but I really wasn't that impressed or that enthused or blown away by her performance. You could tell that she's having some fun when the character is possessed, but I never really felt the character was intimidating like other people did. And the attempts at comedy didn't really do anything for me. But once again, I don't blame the actress for that because what can you do with eeny miny you? Nothing. Because that sucks. And it's lame. Morgan Davies is Danny and Gabrielle Echols is Bridget. Once again, they're not given a lot to work with, and what they are given to work with is bad. So yeah, I'm not going to go too hard on those two performers, but I will say this, they don't have much charisma at all to speak of. So they can't really take what's given to them and salvage anything out of it because they don't have the acting chops and they don't have the charisma to do it. Nell Fisher as Cassie, best performer out of the cast to me. Best consistent performer out of the cast, which is crazy because it's a little girl. It's a very young actress, and she's acting circles around pretty much everybody in the entire movie. You know that you have a film that has some serious flaws if the little girl is the best actor in the entire movie. Um, The rest of the cast, there's literally nothing to say about them because they're nothing characters. It's like this is a nothing movie. It's a nothing movie. It was originally going to be sent direct to streaming. I think it was originally going to be an HBO Max streaming exclusive, but they gave it a screening, and for some reason the audience loved it. So then they decided to release it in the theater. Because if you watch the film, it doesn't look like a theatrical film. It looks like a very low budget streaming kind of movie. And maybe I'd be less hard on it if that was the case, but I would say probably not because it's an Evil Dead film. If you're gonna bring another Evil Dead film to the forefront or to theaters, I expect more. I have higher standards than just it's another Evil Dead movie. This film was so just bland and bad and generic that it gave me a newfound appreciation for the remake. I watched the remake again after this and I was like, you know what? That wasn't half bad. Wasn't great, but I would definitely watch that twice, let alone 3 times over Evil Dead Rise. Let's look at any other technical aspects of the cinematography by Dave Garbett. It's not total garbage, but it's not anything that's great. The editing by Brian Shaw, just a lot of eh. The music by Stephen McKeon. This composer owes Christopher Young royalties because there's so much of the score that is just ripped off from Hellraiser. And anything that isn't ripped off from Hellraiser does nothing for me. Definitely not something that adds anything really to the scenes, doesn't add any suspense, doesn't add any extra adrenaline or creep factor. It's just bland and just as generic as pretty much everything else in the movie. In the 97-minute running time, it feels like it's longer than that because, like I said, there are long stretches where nothing is happening or you're just not invested in it because you're not invested in these characters or this generic plot. So, yeah, as you can see, I did not care for this film. I thought Evil Dead Rise was a disappointment and definitely one of my picks for one of the worst films of 2023 that I've seen to date. And as for this franchise, just don't make any more Evil Dead movies if you're just gonna go away from the tone and from what made those films special and fun. I would rather them just do another season of Ash versus Evil Dead. Spend the money that they wasted on this and do another season of that show instead of what we have here, or do another video game or something instead of this Evil Dead and name only crap. Because that's what it is. It's a crappy film. It's lame. It's boring. There's really not much to it other than the gore. And if I want that, I'll watch better films like Dead Alive. So, anyway, that's my thoughts on Evil Dead Rise. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.